we'd not be facing reality if we didn't acknowledge our feelings of sadness and loss at a time like this, and rightfully so. When someone dies, it's always a hard time. No matter what the circumstances, our feelings are very, very visible, because we all knew and we loved Chris, and we're going to miss her as a wife, as a mom, as a daughter, as a sister, as a very, very special friend. It's times like this we need to come together. We need to hear the promises of God. We need to affirm what those promises mean, both for Chris and for us. And we need to remember Chris and lift up some of the ways she touched our lives and made our lives so much better, so much richer. Touched our lives in deep, wonderful ways. She did touch our lives in different ways. Each of us have our own memories of Chris. And so I want to encourage you to hold on to those memories. Those are God's gift to you. Nobody can take those away from you. But memories need to be nurtured. So you need to continue to think about her and remember those ways that she has touched your life, touched my life, touched our lives. One thing I'm sure our memories would agree on is that Chris was a blast. She was fun. But she had a servant's heart to her. That's one of the phrases that keeps coming back when I think of Chris and how she touched my life and so many lives here. She was someone who really, really made a difference. I was talking to Brad the other day, and several memories of Chris came up, and I just want to share them with you because maybe they'll help trigger some of your own very special memories of Chris. Chris was the middle of 3 children, the only girl, which may explain some things. But she was born to Joseph and Bobby Falco. She spent her early life in the San Joaquin Valley. She was born in Fresno. But around 12 years old, right as she was moving into those teenage years, her family moved to the Santa Cruz area, to Aptos, which is a little town south of Santa Cruz. A wonderful town, a beach town, a great town to grow up in. And I imagine that's where her love of the beach began to take root. After graduating from Aptos High, she started her college career at Cabrillo College, and then she went to San Jose State, transferred to San Jose State. Little did she probably realize at the time that transferring to San Jose State was really going to change her life. Everything was going to change. In college, Chris was on the science track. She was on a degree track for health education. And in one of her classes, in fact, she had 2 classes that were back to back, one right after the other. And in those 2 classes, there was this guy. And he obviously wasn't a science guy, at least at that point. He was a music guy at that point. And she noticed him, and he noticed her. And they kept going to these 2 classes, one after the other, together. And then one day, the second of these 2 classes was abruptly canceled. And this guy made his move. And he asked her out for a Coke. And the rest, as they say, was history. Being that Chris and Brad's majors weren't the same, Brad was in music and the arts, they needed to find a class where they could take together after these 2 classes had ended. So they ended up taking choir class together? Yeah, took a choir class together. And from that point on, they were inseparable. They knew they had something special. That's the way you put it. You told me that how special it was hit home one weekend when Chris and a bunch of girls took a road trip without you. It was a girl thing. And there you were home alone, and all of a sudden you realized just how special she was and that you didn't want to spend the rest of your life without her. You dated through college, and then after college, after graduation, you were married in 1982 in an outdoor wedding in Aptos. Now, most of us guys, we don't dream about what kind of wedding we're going to have. You know, we may dream about our brides, but not about the wedding. But Brad wanted an outdoor wedding. He thought about that ahead of time. And so did Chris. And it just worked out perfectly. They had a big Italian, wonderful outdoor wedding. The only sobering part of the wedding, Brad, you told me, was at the reception, Chris's big Italian uncle came and said to her, "If you have troubles with Brad, let me know." I'm guessing she didn't have any troubles with you. After graduation, Chris and Brad had an opportunity to purchase Brad's family's home. His parents were moving, and they had a chance to buy it, and it was a great opportunity, a great gift, so they moved here to Southern California and began to look for work. Chris started working at Mervyn's. She had worked through college at Mervyn's, transferred down here until she found work in her own field. And the jobs came, first with the VA, and then with Granada Hills Hospital, and then finally with Kaiser. And during this time, Chris also went back to school and got her master's at CSUN in dietetics. But it wasn't just the jobs that came. A couple of guys came. Nick first, and then Luke. And your mom loved being a mom. She lit up whenever she talked about you guys. You know, she loved being with you. She loved being a mom. She was exceedingly proud of both of you. And she was a great mom. That's one of the words that really defines Chris. She was a mom, and a great one. There are other words that helped define her. I've come up with a couple. One is generosity. She was one of the most generous people I've ever met. She went out of her way. If she could do something for somebody else, she would do it, even at the risk of, not meeting her own needs. But she never thought of herself first, always other people. She was a musician. She loved music. She loved enjoying music, whatever it is. She grew up playing the piano. Here at First Pres, she was in the handbell choir. She was in the gospel choir. She was in the cathedral choir when she was part of the Canoga family. There, I understand, she was a part of all the music there, as well as taught the children's choir. And she loved children. That's another thing that she loved dearly. She loved children. She loved you guys, of course, but she loved your friends. I understand she was kind of a second mom to a lot of your friends. They'd come over to your house to hang out, more to be with her than to be with you. She loved going to concerts. She loved Annie Lennox. She would have enjoyed the Grammys the other night when Annie was there wailing away. Chris was not into things, but she was into experiencing life with others. And again, that was one of her gifts. It really was. She and Brad would often invite folks they wanted to get to know, just to a concert or to some special event. And it was an act of generosity and an act of love. You guys invited my wife, Chris, and I. We went to see Cirque du Soleil in Santa Monica. I think it was a little before Chris actually was ill. But it was a special time, and one that I'll always remember. As I said, she had a servant's heart, and she really did. It wasn't just in music ministry, although that was a big part of her life. But here at First Pres, she was part of the high school ministry team, the college ministry team. She was involved in our breathing room, which was our concert venue. She was involved in kids stuff, which was a family and kids kind of ministry that was a part of. She took pictures. My gosh, she took lots and lots of pictures. In fact, that was one of the things Brad was saying. It was hard to find a picture of her because she was always taking the pictures. What else can we say? She loved movies. She loved certain television shows. She liked crime dramas. She liked House. And she liked Walking Dead. Any day at the beach was about as good as it can get. And she loved her animals. She loved her pets. And even though she was a homebody at heart, you guys did some traveling. And she loved the traveling. Got to go to Italy. That was a special time. Was able to travel to England, saw a lot of the western states, Canada, as well as Mexico. Those were precious, precious times. And of course, being married to you, Brad, she had to go see a couple of shuttle launches in Florida. She was somebody who gave of herself and continued to give and never stopped giving. Brad, I know you and Nick have some memories you want to share. I'm going to invite you to come up and use that lectern and share what you have. And again, perhaps some of their memories will help spark some of our memories of Chris.
Wow, there's a lot of people. It's so wonderful to see everyone here. I'm Nick, Chris's firstborn son. This is my partner, Marnie. I wrote a letter to my mom that I want to share with all of you. And after that, I'll also be writing something that Marnie wrote for my mom, but they're sick and can't really speak right now. So, here we go. Dear Mom, here I am, writing a letter to you for your memorial service when I thought we would have so much more time together. There are so many things I wish we had more time to talk about and experience together. But here I am, wondering if you knew all of the unintentional lessons you taught me. So often when we think of our parents, we think of the lessons we were told. You always told me to never speak to strangers, look both ways, do your best in school, you're skinny, eat more. But what about all the lessons you didn't tell me, but you showed me? Everyone that I've talked to after your passing has shared with me how caring you were, how compassionate, loving, patient, generous, all qualities that I strive to embody as well. Every childhood friend that I've had has told me that you were their second mom, like Pastor Jim said. You may have only had 2 biological sons, but you're a mom to many, many children who I'm happy to say are also here today. After becoming a middle school teacher, I found that these motherly qualities of unconditional love and compassion to be necessary when working with and being around children. But how do we learn these qualities? How are they taught? How did you teach them? To me, as well as the many other children you influenced and nurtured. There's no single event that I can point to and say, there, that was true unconditional love and compassion. Instead, it's years and years of memories built upon each other that create these lessons of love, compassion, humanity, generosity that you shared with us. I want to honor your memory, Mom, but how do I do that? What words can encapsulate the person you were and the impact you had and still have on me? So many questions have been running through my head for the past week, and I can't seem to find any answers. I want you to know that I feel more connected to you now than I have in my entire life. I never really identified with you while I was growing up. You cared so much about your children that you often went against what you knew we wanted because you knew it was bad for us. You wanted to protect us, you wanted to nurture us. At the time, being a depressed and insecure teenager, I took this as a sign that you did not love us. And it was not until I became an adult that your actions started to make sense. And especially after working with 11-year-olds day in and day out, I can see how thick-headed, misguided, mistaken children can be sometimes. I want you to know that I have learned from your example in ways you may have never thought of. You always gave us so much time and energy to others to ensure that you would be taken care of. But what I also now see is that you rarely gave yourself space to meet your own needs. You were so busy taking care of everyone else, I don't think you ever really stopped to think about what it is that you need. And this is something that I also struggle with, and I want you to know that I have been working on this and reflecting on it almost daily. I wish you were here to talk about this with me. In the last few months you were with us, I often told you that it was time to let go of trying to take care of others. It's time you let us take care of you. And I was so happy that you let your children and your husband finally take care of you. But everything we did for you is just a fraction of what you did for us over the years. There are no words to encapsulate the kind of complex and amazing person you were and still are to me. I think about you every day and have been sharing my favorite stories of you with people you've never even met, but I know you would love. Thank you for all the stories and memories that will never fade. You will always be a part of me, Mom, and you will always be a part of all the lives of the children you touched. We will take all of the lessons that you taught us, intentional or unintentional, to become the very best we can be. You live on with us in so many ways that I cannot even fathom, with the deepest gratitude and love for your son. And now I'm going to read something that Marnie wrote, who's also very close to my mom. Chris, you were such a wonderful second mom to me and my brother. I wish I had told you more often how much I love you and how thankful I am for everything you did for me and everything you taught me. I want to thank you especially for teaching me to accept help when I was too stubborn to seek it for myself. You taught me this in multiple ways. A couple years ago, I was going through a period of intense depression. Upon hearing about this, you offered to help me pay for my first few sessions of therapy. And watching you go through your own journey with therapy, healing, and positive growth gave me the strength to be more vulnerable and open myself up to the possibility that I could get better too. If you could do it, being the strong and stubborn woman that you were, always putting others' needs above your own, then maybe I could do it too. With your help and the support and love of your family, I was able to start the healing process and really start tackling my depression. I don't know where I would be without you, Chris, and I am so grateful for you for helping me start my journey of positive growth. It means more than I can describe in words. And I wanted to share this story with you all today in case any of you are struggling with your own mental or emotional well-being. I think Chris would want you to know that you are not alone, that everyone needs help sometimes, and that there is no shame in your suffering. There are many people in your life who love you unconditionally and will help you seek the help that you need. Thank you. Now I think my dad is going to share some words also.
Yeah, like Jim, I put together a list of words too that describe Chris. Companionship, contradiction, curiosity, charity, comedy, childlike, competent, compassionate, cautious, very cautious, caring, and these are just the C's. I got all the rest of the alphabet here I need to go through, so hang on, I'll get to them all. Actually, the best way to describe her is not with words, but it's through stories, ways that we, like Jim said, we can figure out how she actually interacted with people. Here's an inner geek part of me. When trying to determine the volume of an object with complex geometry, you need to submerge it in water and see how much water was displaced by that complex object. Everybody follow so far? So imagine like a ball that you've got. You want to know what the volume of the ball, well, you can try to measure it, but the easiest thing is to drop it in a glass and see how much the water went up. Well, the hole that Chris left in our lives is helping us understand her complex geometry. And we only need to look at the people that were around her and how they were moved and how they were shaped by her friendship to determine the volume of her heart. So here's two stories. Chris befriended a food service worker at her hospital in Woodland Hills. Chris made a pretty big impression on her, so much so that she told her sister, who worked down in Kaiser Sunset. She was a nurse down at Kaiser Sunset, and when Chris got sick, she told the mother, the sister, my friend's coming in, could you make sure to take care of her? Well, the first day of the operation, the first operation day, we had 2 operations and a bunch of other stuff too. We had to be there before sunrise and do the process of going into a little room and then a littler room and then an even littler room. And every time you have to take off articles of clothing and put on other stuff. So it was a really complicated thing. But Alice Fong showed up and started reminding us about what the goodness and faithfulness of God and the hope that we can have. And she gave us a picture of Jesus, and she wrote down on the bottom of it, "Jesus, I trust you." And that hung up in every hospital room that she was in, and it hung up at our house. And that was our goal for the entire time, is Jesus, I trust you. But Chris, of course, being who she was, turned it around and says, well, how can we pray for you? So typical Chris. So Alice visited a bunch of times, and it was such a comfort, for us. The second person I'd like to talk about is Ashley McLaughlin. She's an Australian teenager, so we should have never have met her. It was worlds away from us. However, as Providence would have it, her father treated her to the same tour of Italy that Chris and I did, and it was one of those Trafalgar tours where you all pile onto a bus and ride around all the places. So this intelligent, outgoing young woman was doted on by all of us, because most of us were over 50, and a teenager, So she found special kinship with Chris in the few weeks that we spent in those very close quarters. They had love of cats and love of laughter and of good stories and of Italian food. So they got this common bond, and their relationship was part friendship and part sisterhood and part mentoring. We kept in touch through Facebook and email, and her father provided us a lot of comfort from so far away during the last year and a half. When Ash heard of Chris's death, she wrote a poem, and I'd like to read it for you as sort of the closing. I thought of you with love today, but that is nothing new. I thought of you yesterday and the days before that too. I think of you in silence. I often speak your name. All I have are memories and your picture in a frame. Your memory is my keepsake with which I'll never part. God has you in his keeping. I have you in my heart.
Thanks, guys. I like that poem. Yeah, she continued to mentor. She mentored our MOPS. Yeah, there was a MOPS mentor here, too. A lot of young folks were blessed by her. Obviously, this last year has been hard. It's an understatement. First, the diagnosis of cancer, then the surgery, and then the recovery and trying to learn how to communicate and speak, and then the reoccurrence of the cancer. And yet through it all, Chris, she was a fighter. She did not give up. She wanted to be there for the next chapter, for your lives, and to spend it with you, Brad. But whatever happened, she had that deep conviction that she was in God's hands, and she knew that. In fact, the two most important things we can say about anyone, we can say about Chris, and that is she knew the love of God. She knew the promises of Jesus, and she knew and trusted those promises to her. So right, I think it was the night before her surgery that we gathered in here. We put her right in the center there, and we surrounded her and prayed for her. We prayed for the surgery. We prayed for the doctors and guidance. We prayed that God would heal her. We prayed that God would heal her in our time. And it didn't happen quite like that. But Chris never doubted that God was bringing healing. And we need not doubt it either. She was convinced that God was with her, that God was not going to let her go, that it was going to be okay. She gave us another model. She was mentoring us in other ways. She was sharing with us what faith is all about. And it is about trust. Chris knew and she trusted Jesus' promises that God's goodness would prevail. And it will. I think of Chris and I think of good and faithful servant. She was that. She lived a good, meaningful life, a life that we can all be thankful for, a life that we can all be glad we shared in parts of it, big parts and little parts. She knew what it was to live life, to be a faithful disciple of Jesus, and to love one another. She was a loving wife, mom, daughter, sister, and friend. There's only one other thing we need to do this afternoon, and that is just remember those promises of God to Chris and to us. The promises that really make the difference. Why we can grieve, but we don't grieve like people who have no hope. First, Jesus' words, I am the resurrection and the life, and those who believe in me, though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. That's an incredible promise. And then that promise that Paul said, that Kyle read a little earlier, that nothing can ever separate us from the love of Jesus Christ. Nothing will ever separate us from the love of God. These two affirmations provide both a ground of the comfort and the hope that we need as God's people, and especially at a time like this. Paul was able to write in the midst of all things, in every human experience, even death, that nothing is able to separate us from the love and the care of God. Chris is okay. She is with the Lord. The God that we worship is a God who knows where we are, knows where we hurt, knows where we need help, and God promises to comfort us. God will do it if we let him. But God not only comforts, God gives the hope of the gospel. that death is not the last word, but that the resurrection life which began with Jesus is extended to Chris as well as to each one of us. That's why Paul was able to write so confidently to those young Christians in Thessalonica. He said, I want you to be sure, friends, about those who have died. I don't want you to grieve about them like other people who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and that he rose again, and that it will be the same for those who have died in Jesus, that God will bring them with him. When a family member or friend dies, it's always a hard time. But let's let it be a time of thankfulness. Let's be thankful for Chris's life and all the ways she touched us. It's a time of comfort, for God promises to help us through this, that we are not alone in this journey. God will help us if we're open to that. And finally, it's a time of hope. That's the gospel. Death is not the last word. Jesus Christ is the last word. And that word is hope, and that word is life. We're going to take a look at some pictures of Chris. They're going to be on the video, the screens there. Brad, and you put these together, right? And they chronicle her life. Let's take a look at that great life.